My sister-in-law was deceived and got pregnant. She was determined to keep the baby, even at the cost of manipulating my child, just to transfer her baby to my name. I hated her for it, but later I discovered it was all my husband's idea. He already had an illegitimate child with his true love and doted on her immensely. I sneered and devised a plan to drive a wedge between them, causing their family to fall apart. 3 days ago, I suddenly felt unwell and kept wanting to vomit. A hospital check confirmed I was indeed pregnant. I was overjoyed. I was already in my 30s and had been anxious about not getting pregnant. Despite my husband's parents urging us, he always comforted me, saying it was okay if we couldn't have children. His patience and kindness made me feel even more guilty because he clearly loved children. So, for myself and for my husband, I quit my job a year ago to focus on getting pregnant. I visited the hospital countless times and drank numerous herbal remedies, finally resulting in this pregnancy. At that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of joy. But my happiness was abruptly interrupted by a sudden call from Flo. On the other end, Flo was crying hysterically, "Luna, where are you? Come home quickly, your sister-in-law has been deceived." Hearing Flo's words, I was stunned. Ignoring the doctor's advice for older pregnant women, I rushed home. When I got home, I learned that my sister-in-law, Grace, had been deceived by her boyfriend, who was 8 years older than her. She lost her virginity, got pregnant, and was left with a loan. By the time we found out, the man had disappeared without a trace, and now creditors were hounding us for repayment. After understanding the situation, I felt faint. My husband, Wesley, was on a business trip and couldn't be reached. So I had to endure my discomfort and negotiate with the creditors, ultimately using the money I had saved for baby formula to pay off the debt, barely calming the situation. My just-turned adult sister-in-law clutched her belly, crying, "Mom, Luna, I'm so young, what should I do now?" Wesley lost his father at a young age, and Flo had suffered a lot raising him alone, so he was particularly filial. Before we got married, he specifically asked me to be kind to Flo. For Wesley's sake, even though I knew Flo looked down on me for being 5 years older than him, I treated his family as my own. But now, I couldn't hold back anymore. I opened my mouth and said, "Gracie, I told you before that your boyfriend wasn't as simple as he seemed. Didn't you take my advice to heart? But you're still young, and fortunately, everything can still be fixed. Don't be sad, okay?" Finally, I gently suggested to Flo that it was better to terminate the pregnancy while it was still early. As Gracie was just an adult, an unwed pregnancy wasn't ideal. To my surprise, before Gracie could respond, Flo got angry. She frowned and glared at me fiercely. "Luna, I didn't expect you to be so heartless. This isn't Gracie's fault. What kind of terrible idea is this? It's so harmful to her body. She's so young. What will she do in the future? And what are your intentions? Do you want everyone to know that your sister-in-law did such a thing at 18? How will she get married in the future?" Flo was adamant about secretly keeping the baby and not letting anyone know. She even found a wealthy suitor to pursue Gracie. I had a habit of saving money by buying gold, and to make the story more believable, Flo didn't hesitate to raid my bedroom and take all my jewelry to give to Gracie. She even spent money to have photos of Gracie and the wealthy suitor taken on vacation, flaunting these proofs to everyone to cover up the truth. No matter how I tried to persuade her, it was useless. I could only wait for Wesley to come back and talk to them. That night, Wesley returned from his business trip, and I told him about Gracie's situation. "Wes, you know Gracie doesn't have a stable job, and I quit my job a while ago. The money we saved has already been used to pay off their debt. Now, you're the only source of income. If Mom wants Gracie to keep the baby, we'll have 2 babies in the house." The financial pressure aside, Gracie is still so young, just a child herself. Becoming a single mom at this age, what will she do in the future? I'm also afraid she'll regret it. Can you help talk to Mom? Gracie's future is still ahead of her. Wesley frowned as he listened to me, deep in thought. Even when he heard that both my sister-in-law and I were pregnant, his face showed no expression. It was only when he learned that it was Flo's idea that his expression softened a bit. He finally said, "Mooney, you're right. Gigi is only 18. What was Mom thinking? Keeping this child will only cause more trouble. Just focus on taking care of yourself. I'll talk to them tomorrow. This really isn't a good idea. Come on, don't worry about it. It's getting late, let's get some rest." Although he agreed with my point of view and said what I wanted to hear, my heart still sank. I had a bad feeling that in the end he would still give in to his mother just like before. And sure enough, I was right. Early the next morning, I was woken up by a loud commotion outside the door. I opened the door to see Wesley carrying several bags of luggage, standing behind Flo and Gigi. Hearing the noise, he looked up and smiled awkwardly. "Mooney," he began, but was immediately interrupted by Florence, who rolled her eyes and said, "Luna, I knew you were the one whispering in his ear. I'm not dead yet, and you already want to show your sister-in-law who's boss? You even want to control whether she has a child? If I were dead, would you turn the world upside down?" As soon as she said this, Wesley's face darkened. He angrily interrupted her, "Mom, what are you talking about? You're in good health." Then he turned to me and said, "Moon, Mom is angry right now. Please apologize to her." Seeing the plea in his eyes, I was momentarily stunned, but my anger only grew. I was doing this for whom? And now Wesley was playing the peacemaker, for whose benefit? Flo and Gigi refused to work, spending their days playing cards and visiting friends, all supported by Wesley. After all these years, he's just a low-level manager at a company, earning a modest salary. Supporting 2 freeloaders is bad enough, but now they want to let his mother have a child. My savings were depleted by these 2 women, and now I was pregnant. We would need money for many things in the future. Wesley might not be worried, but I was. I pressed my lips together and looked at Wesley. "What did you tell me yesterday? And now you're going back on your word?" I don't oppose Gracie having a child, but she's still so young, and the expenses are a problem. No one in the family works, and we rely on your salary. How can that be enough? From prenatal checkups to baby formula and education, it will cost at least $20,000 or $30,000. Where will we get that kind of money? I laid out the numbers clearly for Wesley, and he fell silent. Seeing the situation turn against her, Gigi's eyes reddened, and she said tearfully, "Sister-in-law, I didn't expect you to be like this. My brother and I are family. There's no need to be so clear-cut. Why are you always interfering in our relationship and calling us freeloaders? Aren't you also not working? We've been understanding because we're family, but I didn't expect you to think of us this way." Flo was also unhappy and rushed forward to scold me. "Well, I finally see your true colors. You're really just fighting with me over money, aren't you? You must be something, complaining about the cost of raising a child. If you don't want to spend the money, don't have one yourself. What right do you have to stop my daughter from having a child? You're not getting any younger, and you're like an old hen that can't lay eggs. Always making a fuss about getting pregnant. Who knows how much junk you've eaten? Who knows what kind of child you'll give birth to? If you ask me, you should give up and stop tainting our family bloodline." As she spoke, Flo stood up and walked towards my bedroom, muttering, "I like this bedroom, it's sunny. From now on, Gigi will stay here to take care of herself. You and Wes can move next door. Once Gigi's child is born, we'll put it under your name, so she can marry well in the future." I let out a cold laugh. Not only did she want to take over my bedroom, but she also wanted to register the child under my name, making me raise another person for free. How could there be such a good deal? I pushed Wesley to stop his mother's farce, but he didn't move. He just glanced at me and said, "Mooney, they're just blunt. They don't mean any harm." Hearing this, I was stunned for 3 seconds before I reacted. I was so angry that I trembled all over. Blunt? So he agreed with them. I raised my trembling hand, unable to resist the urge to slap him, but before I could lift my arm, Grace suddenly pushed me hard and I fell to the ground. "Don't you dare bully my brother." I sat on the floor, dazed, with sharp pain in my abdomen. I felt a warm liquid flowing out of me. I reached out and saw a smear of red blood. My pupils contracted violently, and the string in my mind snapped. I grabbed Wesley's sleeve, terrified, and begged him, "Wes, take me to the hospital. Please save us. Save our baby." I was so tense I didn't even dare to raise my voice, fearing that any slight movement would make my child disappear. Wesley squatted down, holding me tightly and comforting me anxiously. "Mooney, I'll take you to the hospital right away. Don't worry, our child will be fine." Even though he was saying comforting words, he didn't make any move to take me to the hospital. I couldn't tell if it was my imagination, but I vaguely sensed that he was restraining me. I stared at Wesley as if I was meeting him for the first time and whispered hoarsely, "Wesley, please take me to the hospital. Save our child." The commotion attracted Florence, who was packing things in the bedroom. She looked at us and laughed, raising her eyebrows smugly. "Oh, how careless. It seems that harming others ultimately harms oneself. This is fate. Wes, our family shouldn't learn from him. Look at how worried he is. Take him to the hospital quickly." Wesley immediately sprang into action, picking me up and responding quickly. But I felt like I was being deprived of oxygen, my head buzzing, tears streaming down my face. My voice gradually turned from a low roar to an accusation. "This is your child too, your only flesh and blood." I couldn't feel what Wesley was doing anymore. Only a crisp, disdainful voice echoed in my mind. "Ha, what only flesh and blood? This is just your only child, not his." But before I could think further, a wave of dizziness hit me and I passed out. When I woke up again, it was a day later. I instinctively covered my stomach, only to be interrupted by the doctor beside me. "Ma'am, the child couldn't be saved. You were brought to the hospital too late. We did everything we could. Please accept our condolences." Hearing the doctor's words, I quickly recalled everything that had happened. Feeling my flat stomach, I murmured with a trembling voice, "My child, my baby, I'm sorry, I couldn't protect you." Seeing how heartbroken I was, the doctor paused and sighed sympathetically. "Ma'am, since it has already happened, you need to look forward. No one expected this to happen. How did that dog suddenly jump out? It's not your fault, don't blame yourself. Life goes on, and even without children, you can still live a good life. Luckily, you have a good husband and mother-in-law. You don't know, but when you were brought to the hospital, they insisted on saving you, saying that no matter what, your safety must be ensured." A strong urge to vomit overwhelmed me. I bent over slightly, retching a few times, trying to steady myself. I looked at the doctor in disbelief, speaking slowly and clearly. "You said Wesley said that? What dog suddenly jumped out? What accident? What ensuring my safety first?" "Wesley, Wesley." I gritted my teeth, repeating his name, then suddenly laughed uncontrollably, tears streaming down my face. The doctor, seeing my hysterical state, took a few steps back in shock, about to say something when Wesley hurriedly pushed him out of the room. "Doctor, thank you for your help. Please leave us for now. I'll comfort my wife." The doctor obediently left. Wesley took a few steps to my side, looking at me with a mix of sadness, guilt, and worry in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mooney. I was too panicked at the time and didn't react quickly enough to take you to the hospital. That was my fault. I know you really wanted this child, but to me, you are the most important. If you want to blame me, that's fine, but I hope you can pull yourself together. It breaks my heart to see you like this. If the child is gone, then it's gone. The doctor also said that given your age and unstable health, there might be risks in future pregnancies. If you really want a child, we can adopt Gigi's child as our own. How about that? Seeing no reaction from me, he continued, and don't blame Gigi. She was too worried about me at the time, so she got a bit emotional. You were the same before, so you must understand her. Although she didn't mean it, I still gave her a good scolding. She knows you were trying to help her at the time. She also said that when you come back, she'll definitely apologize to you properly. After all, we're family, and there's no overnight grudge, right? Listening to his hypocritical words, I lowered my head, biting my teeth hard, my nails digging deep into my flesh. But the violent emotions that almost overwhelmed me suddenly calmed down. I remained silent for a full 2 minutes. When I looked up again, I had composed myself, as if nothing significant had happened, and forced a smile. You're right, Wes. I was too extreme before, not understanding or respecting others' choices. I will make it up to Gigi, be filial to our parents, and treat that child as my own. I was too understanding in front of Wesley before. Hearing what I said, he excitedly grabbed my hand and said with relief, "It's good that you think this way," looking all harmonious and carefree. But only I knew how intense the hatred in my heart was. I stayed in the hospital for 2 days before Wesley brought me back, saying it was to avoid suspicion. To outsiders, I was still pregnant, so when Grace gave birth, it wouldn't seem odd. I didn't say anything and let Wesley make the arrangements. After completing the discharge procedures, he took me home. As soon as I entered, I noticed that in just 2 or 3 days, the house had completely changed. The already somewhat empty room was now filled with diapers and baby formula. The most eye-catching item was the stroller I had chosen for my baby, with the clothes I had made for him still on it. Florence and Grace were leisurely drinking wine and watching TV, completely at ease. Hearing the noise, Florence barely lifted her eyelids and said indifferently, "You're back. Just in time, the lunch dishes haven't been washed. We saved them for you." Maybe my gaze at the stroller was too obvious, as Florence frowned slightly and said, "What are you looking at? You wasteful person, buying so many baby items without a word. But it's just as well, you won't need them anymore. They'll be perfect for my dear grandson, so I'll forgive you." I looked at Florence's smug face without saying a word, lowering my eyes as if in shame. Seeing this, Florence became even more arrogant, incessantly scolding me and ordering me around. I obediently complied, but when Wesley came close, I suddenly slapped him with all my strength. In no time, his face swelled up. Everything happened so suddenly that Florence and Grace screamed in unison, "Are you crazy?" Wesley clearly didn't expect me to do such a thing. After recovering from the shock, he looked at me in disbelief. I ignored their words and pointed at Wesley, angrily shouting, "Wesley, what are you up to? I've been in the hospital. And this is how you take care of Gigi? Look at the wine Gigi is drinking. Is that something she should be drinking? Gigi is the most precious person in our family right now. If you continue to be so careless with her, don't blame me for being unkind." The whole family was stunned, clearly not expecting me to say such things. But the story wasn't over. As soon as I finished speaking, I rushed to the stroller like a rocket, kicked it against the wall, and frantically used a stick to sweep away all the baby items in the living room, exclaiming, "Oh no! Look at what you've done. Don't you know Gigi's baby is precious? How can you use such cheap things for this child? These are all leftovers from that ill-fated child. It's bad luck." Hearing this, Florence's face immediately changed. She pointed at Wesley and scolded, "Wesley, what are you doing? How can you give Gigi that dead child's things? This is Gigi's first child. Can't you be more considerate? Exactly, I immediately echoed. Save where you should and spend where you must. You should never skimp on baby items. Just in time, I did some research on the best baby products while preparing for pregnancy. Wes, transfer me some money, and I'll help get some new things for Gigi to clear this bad luck. Wesley suddenly froze, his face contorting for a while before he hesitantly said, "Mom, Luna, does it really matter?" "What do you mean it doesn't matter?" I coldly interrupted. "By the time it matters, it'll be too late." "Are you reluctant to spend money? Don't tell me you can't even buy some things for them." After saying this, I turned to Grace, a smile slowly spreading at the corners of my eyes. "Gigi, your sister-in-law will take care of you. After all, you're the most precious in our family now. Your happiness and health are the most important. I remember you wanted that pineapple phone, right? Don't worry, your sister-in-law will get a job tomorrow and buy it for you. Your brother should set an example too." Hearing this, Grace's eyes lit up, and she immediately joined in criticizing Wesley. Under pressure, Wesley's face turned red, but he eventually transferred $30,000 to me in front of everyone. Ignoring Wesley's expression, I accepted it with a clear conscience because they owed me this much. But this was far from enough. I wanted to bring this family to ruin, to see Wesley stripped of everything, to make him pay for my child's life. Thinking of this, I couldn't contain my desire for revenge any longer. I immediately went out, supposedly to buy things for Grace, but instead, I secretly contacted the most famous private detective in the city, asking him to investigate all of Wesley's relationships. I couldn't forget the words I overheard from Grace before I fainted. What did she mean by Wesley isn't like that? Did Wesley have another child? Gnashing my teeth, I recalled Wesley's seemingly honest and reliable appearance, feeling that the past decade together was a joke. Overwhelmed with sorrow, I almost wanted to slap myself. But this was clearly not the time for regret. I needed to seize every moment to make them pay the price they deserved. After meeting with the private detective, I immediately went to the shopping center and ordered several of the most advanced cameras and recording devices, planning to install them at home. Then, I spent Wesley's money on food and drinks until I returned home at 10 o'clock in the evening. As soon as I stepped through the door, I saw Florence sitting on the couch with a face as dark as thunder, clearly ready to interrogate me. Florence was the first to strike. "Luna, what's going on? You just went to buy some things. Why did it take so long? Don't you know you need to make dinner? Are you trying to starve us?" Hearing this, I glanced at the kitchen, which showed no signs of any cooking, and almost laughed out loud. It was already 10 o'clock, and they still expected someone else to serve them? Truly, the poor are the most troublesome. Grace obviously didn't think so. She looked self-righteous. "Yeah, Luna, why didn't I see you bring me the phone? What's going on? I've been waiting for you all day. You're so slow you didn't make dinner, and you didn't buy the phone. Were you lying to me this morning?" As she spoke, she suddenly stood up and threw the cup in her hand at me. I dodged lightly, and the cup shattered against the door, leaving faint scratches. If it had hit me, it would have been much worse. I didn't show any anger, but instead chuckled. "Gigi, I'm sorry. I originally went out to buy you that pineapple phone, but then I thought, with your great contributions, you deserve a better phone. So, I went for a job interview instead. The salary is $10,000 a month. Don't worry, from now on, I'll work hard to earn money to support you and the baby. As soon as I get my first paycheck this month, I'll buy you a pineapple phone right away. But I have one concern. If I go out to work, who will cook for you all? Maybe I should quit the job and live a bit harder." The last few sentences I said softly and slowly, successfully watching Grace's face change from surprise to anxiety. "Sis, don't," Grace said quickly and urgently, as if afraid I would refuse if she was a second late. "Oh, you've found such a good job. Why stay home to cook? There are 3 of us here. We won't starve, right? Just focus on your work. Don't worry about us." Florence was grinning from ear to ear, but who would cook? My question plunged the whole family into silence. The 3 of them looked at each other but said nothing, the expected scene making me snicker. Wesley, who believed that a gentleman should stay away from the kitchen, would never step into it. And the other 2 were lazybones. If I hadn't taken the initiative to cook because I couldn't stand it, thinking everyone has likes and dislikes and not wanting to force them, they would have argued every day about who should cook. Thinking of this, I wanted to slap myself. How could I have been so foolish? But now, I wouldn't indulge them anymore. Wesley sat on the side, indifferent, and the other 2 seemed to realize this. Florence's smile froze, and she tried to change the subject. "Oh dear, am I getting old? Why do I feel back pain? You guys chat, I'll go to my room." "Mom?" Grace grabbed Florence, hurriedly saying, "What do you mean? Are you suggesting I should cook?" "Don't forget I'm pregnant. I can't do heavy work. Both my brother and sister-in-law have jobs and need to earn money. You're the most suitable person for this." Florence looked at Grace in disbelief, her face turning red with anger. "Grace, I treat you so well, and now you push me out when something happens. Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you're right. Don't you know you should respect your parents? When I was pregnant with you and your brother, I worked every day and didn't complain." "That was the past," Grace immediately interrupted. "Luna can earn so much a month. If you don't do it, do you expect my brother to? Don't forget I'm carrying their child." Florence turned her gaze to Wesley, seeking help. Wesley's face stiffened, and he looked away, saying slowly, "Mom, we've spent too much money recently. Our family isn't wealthy now. Grace is right. You should help out. Besides, it's just cooking. It doesn't take long. Luna used to cook for us on time even when she was working." Florence was speechless. Under the pressure of the 3, she had no choice but to agree, her eyes filled with resentment. I lowered my head to hide the smile in my eyes. The next morning, I saw Florence grumbling in the kitchen, cooking frozen dumplings. But because she cooked with resentment, they were served undercooked, causing Wesley and Grace to complain bitterly. I didn't even look at them, found an excuse to leave, and headed straight to the cafe where I had an appointment with a private detective. The detective was very efficient. He had sent me a message last night saying the investigation was complete and we would discuss it today. Through my conversation with the private detective, I vaguely learned that Wesley had an illegitimate child outside, but the situation was far worse than I had imagined. It felt like an invisible hand had slapped me hard, and even when I got the information, my hands couldn't stop trembling, and a chill crept into my heart. I stared at the photo of Wesley, and that woman being intimate, recognizing her as the cousin Wesley often mentioned. Her name was Jade, and Wesley had brought her to our home many times. I had heard that she had been unlucky in love, got pregnant before marriage, and was raising her child alone. The child was now 8 or 9 years old. Wesley had told me many times that his cousin had it tough, and he often asked me to help her out. I took his words to heart, inviting her over for meals and giving her child red envelopes during holidays. But who would have thought that I was actually raising Wesley's illegitimate child? She had deceived me to this extent. The absurdity of it all hit me hard. I looked over the information countless times, and everything from the past started to make sense. No wonder Florence and her family liked Jade's child so much. I used to find it odd because they never cared for other people's children. Now it was all clear. They were doting on their own grandson. The desire for revenge surged within me like never before. This family was simply born evil, completely disrespectful. I let out a cold laugh. Since that was the case, they shouldn't blame me for being unkind. With this in mind, I decisively picked up my phone and dialed Jade's number. "Mom, you've been doing the housework all by yourself, and that's not right. Wes and Gracie don't care about you, but I do. So, I found a housekeeper to take care of you." How about that? In the evening, I returned home to find Wesley and Grace sitting on the couch like kings, waiting for Florence to cook in the kitchen. The sound of angry clattering came from the kitchen. I smiled slightly and called Florence to the living room. "Florence, you've been struggling with cooking every day. Wouldn't it be nice to have some help?" She raised her eyebrows in surprise and joy. "Really?" "Of course it's true, Mom. Don't worry about the money, it will come out of my salary." "She's already at the door, and she's someone you know. I'll bring her in." With that, I waved towards the door, and Jade walked in shyly, greeting everyone. "Auntie, cousin, Gigi, please take care of me from now on." Wesley fell off the couch in shock and anger. Why is it you?" I smiled and walked over to Wesley, easily pulling him up. "Wes, what's wrong? Are you too happy to see our cousin?" Florence stammered, "Luna, why is the housekeeper Jade? This isn't appropriate, is it?" "Why not?" I interrupted. "Wes always told me how tough things were for Jade and asked me to help her out. She doesn't have a formal job, so I thought she could help around here. It's easier for her and she can earn some money." I smiled and took Jade's hand. "Don't mind Jade. Mom isn't looking down on you, she just doesn't want you to be too tired. You can stay here and treat this as your home." My words made the three of them change their expressions instantly. Grace, who couldn't hide her feelings, nervously pulled me aside. "Sister-in-law, you don't mean anything else, do you?" "What do you mean?" I pretended to be confused. "Nothing." Florence pulled Grace twice, and seeing my confused look, she sighed in relief. "Gigi is just worried you'll be too tired." I looked at the two who had inadvertently confessed and felt speechless but still pretended to be clueless and laughed. "Since that's the case, Jade, help Mom with dinner. I have to work late tonight, so don't worry about making dinner for me." With that, I left without paying attention to the varied expressions behind me. After leaving, I found a random restaurant near the house and opened my phone to watch the camera feed. As soon as I left, Wesley's face turned cold, and he pulled Jade into the bedroom, closing the door. But before Wesley could speak, Jade burst into tears, throwing herself into his arms. "Brother, do you not love me anymore? Why are you so good to Grace's child? Have you forgotten about Xiao Xiao? He's your biological son, but you haven't visited him for days, and the money you send has halved. I thought something happened to you, but it turns out you were giving it to Grace's child." Earlier, when I called Jade, I had told her everything, including Grace's pregnancy, her child's adoption under my name, and Wesley transferring money for Grace's child, even if reluctantly. But in Jade's eyes, it was a classic case of losing what was rightfully hers. A woman who willingly lets her child be an illegitimate one without any apparent reason is definitely not doing it for true love. If not for money, then what else could it be? If everything had gone as planned, most of Wesley's money would have ended up in her pocket. But now, someone is competing with her, so how could she stay calm? Sure enough, as soon as I mentioned inviting her to work as a nanny at our house, she agreed without hesitation. Her current behavior further confirms my suspicions. As soon as Jade finished speaking, Wesley's initially accusatory face immediately turned guilty. "I'm sorry, Jay. I didn't mean it," he said. But Jade was still relentless. "Wes, you said the same thing when Luna got pregnant. You used to put medicine in her herbal drinks every time, but once you deliberately stopped, causing her to get pregnant, you said you had other plans. Fine. Then you tricked her, saying her child wouldn't threaten Xiao, but now there's another child from Grace. If her child is born and registered under your name as Luna said, what will happen to me and Xiao? Maybe I should just take Xiao and leave. By the end, Jade's voice was thick with sobs, which made Wesley panic. He grabbed Jade's hand and hurriedly expressed his feelings. "Jay, don't always talk about leaving. You know, I explained before that I deliberately stopped the medicine to give Luna hope and then despair. Wasn't it to make her feel guilty and initiate a divorce, transferring all the assets to my name? I didn't expect Grace to get pregnant. I originally wanted to send her away, but Mom has always protected her and I couldn't find a reason. But don't worry, I promise I'll handle this. I'll find an opportunity to make Grace leave, okay?" Listening to their conversation, my heart sank into an icy pit, but I quickly forced myself to calm down. If I hadn't secretly installed cameras at home, I might never have known the truth about why I couldn't get pregnant for so long, or that Wesley had such thoughts. It was all to make me feel guilty for not being able to have children, to make me initiate a divorce and give up my share of the marital assets. I let out a cold snort, quietly listening to their plans to make Grace leave and make me think about divorce, feeling that I had gained a lot. I originally just wanted to catch evidence of their affair, but I didn't expect such a big gift. After listening, I didn't hesitate for a moment. I took out my laptop, edited the video, and anonymously sent the video and audio to Grace's phone. I ordered a cup of coffee and sipped it slowly. Soon Grace called me. Even through the phone, I could feel her panic and anger. "Sis, come quickly! Look what I found. Wesley and Jade are teaming up against us. We must show them and kick him out of the house." After speaking, Grace directly forwarded the information I sent her to my phone. I echoed Grace's words, urging her to confront Wesley and Jade first, saying I would come later. In reality, I had already seen through Grace's true nature and just wanted to pull in an ally. So I leisurely finished my coffee before heading home. I arrived late, and by the time I got home, the place was in chaos. Florence had already overturned the table and, together with Grace, was swinging a broom at Wesley. Jade, seeing that the mother and daughter were not to be trifled with, stood far away, afraid of getting involved. By a stroke of bad luck, one of Florence's hits accidentally struck Wesley's sensitive spot, causing him to roll on the ground in pain. "Mom, it hurts, calm down, stop hitting me." But Florence, in a frenzy, snarled, "You still no pain? You heartless wretch, you dare to harm your own sister for someone else. What else won't you do? Are you going to harm me one day too?" Wesley, having no other options, turned to Jade in the corner for help, pleading, Jay, pull them away, please." This shifted the attention. Florence and Grace exchanged a glance and charged at Jade. Grace shouted, "Almost forgot about you." Jade's pitiful look infuriated Grace even more. She picked up a nearby phone and threw it at her. With a thud, Jade didn't have time to dodge, and the phone hit her forehead squarely. Blood quickly trickled down her forehead, drop by drop. "Ah!" Jade screamed in rage. When she looked up again, her eyes were red with anger. She raised her hand and ran towards Grace, shouting, "Did I do something wrong? How dare you, a useless person, act so arrogantly and even hit me? Let me tell you, Bonnie is being kind to you." I said slowly, "Gracie, do you still remember the time I wasted $10,000 to pay off your debt? Even though Wes deliberately set me up, do you remember who pushed me?" Grace was startled, her panicked eyes darting around as she planned to flee. When she saw me standing at the doorway, her eyes immediately lit up. She quickly ran behind me, grabbing my sleeve. Startled, I didn't have time to dodge, so I had to tightly hold on to Jade and toss him aside. Jade screamed and fell to the ground, and my commotion drew the attention of everyone in the room. Grace came to her senses, grabbed my hand, and with tears and snot streaming down her face, cried, "Sis, you're finally here. Look at this arrogant jerk. Please teach my brother and him a lesson. They're so heartless, your child was harmed because of them too." Wesley sensed something, his eyes darting back and forth between us with suspicion. Suddenly he realized and shouted angrily at me, "Luna, it was you all along! I should have made you have that baby and then hurt it right in front of you." Wesley's words hit me like a ton of bricks, directly touching my most sensitive nerve. Wes was stunned by my slap. I ignored him and threw the divorce papers at him. "Sign it." Wesley took a long time to come to his senses. He picked up the divorce agreement and opened it, revealing an incredulous expression. He roared, "Luna, are you out of your mind? Leaving with nothing and compensating you with $500,000? I couldn't help but smile as I watched them. Is it still not enough? Wesley, this conclusion and the amount were determined after I consulted a professional divorce lawyer. Of course, if you want, adding a bit more money is also possible. Not only did you cheat during our marriage and have an illegitimate child, but you also tampered with my medication for so long and even deliberately set me up. You not only made mistakes but also severely impacted my health. As the one at fault, do you think this judgment is unfair? Wesley, after hearing this, struggled to get up and rushed over, ready to give me 2 slaps. Don't you have any questions? So, how did you get the video and recording you sent to Grace? But the next second, I pushed her away with my foot. I noticed that Florence and Grace seemed to want to stop me, so I added calmly, "And besides, I'm not asking for this money for myself. After we get divorced, I'll give this money to Mom and Gigi for free. Having a son and brother like you is not easy for them." Florence and Grace's eyes lit up, and they immediately joined in the criticism of Wesley. Wesley was so angry he felt like coughing up blood. I saw that he still refused to sign, so I said fiercely, "Fine, you won't sign, huh?" I spoke firmly, leaving no room for negotiation. Wesley finally panicked. He dropped to his knees with a thud and begged for mercy. "No, Luna, I was wrong. It was my infidelity first. I'll sign the papers right now. I just got promoted to assistant manager a few days ago." I watched as Wesley frantically pulled a pen out of his pocket and shakily signed his name. I quickly put the divorce agreement into my pocket, making sure it was secure, and finally felt at ease. After a scream, Grace fell to the ground, bleeding profusely. Florence analyzed the situation, ran over, and hugged Grace tightly, crying loudly. The 2 people next to me were stunned. I quickly reacted and immediately took out my phone to call an ambulance. Because the child is innocent, the ambulance arrived quickly, and soon Grace was lying there waiting for help. On the way, the doctor said that Grace's baby's position was unstable, and coupled with severe external impact, the fetus might not survive. Now, they could only perform a minor surgery to stabilize the mother. But when it was time for the surgery, a problem arose because no one had paid the fee. Finally, she realized she couldn't rely on her brother and turned her attention to me, as if grasping at her last straw. "Sister-in-law, please help me. Can you pay the fee for me? I am so afraid of dying." I looked coldly at Grace, not saying a word, feeling as if all the blood in my body had frozen. Grace was terrified. Suddenly, she realized she was one of the culprits who had hurt me. She trembled all over, repeatedly saying sorry, begging for my forgiveness, and hoping I would save her. We remained silent for an unknown amount of time until Grace, in despair, collapsed on the ground, giving up on asking for help. I smirked and said, "But I'll still help you pay the fee, as long as you're willing to do anything." Grace, like a traveler in the desert seeing water, hurriedly agreed, afraid that I would change my mind if she delayed even a second. I didn't hesitate anymore. I immediately took out the loan from my pocket and handed it to Grace. "It's nothing, just a deal using the $100,000 you owed before. I believe with your intelligence, this amount of money is nothing. I made a deal with the guy who lent me the high-interest loan, got back the $100,000 that originally belonged to me, and promised to repay him double $200. 0, 0, 0, 0. Grace would repay it." Grace didn't listen to anything else. She signed the papers without hesitation, eagerly waiting for me to pay the fee. I didn't disappoint her and went to pay the fee under her expectant gaze. When I left the hospital, I originally planned to take the divorce agreement directly to the local court to sue Wesley. But just as I stepped out of the hospital, I saw Wesley and Jade standing in the distance, as if waiting for someone. I immediately had a bad premonition. Wesley had now signed the divorce agreement, not only giving me all the marital property, but also owing me $500,000. I knew that when people are desperate, they can do anything. So I decisively took out my phone and called the police. The police arrived quickly. Sure enough, Wesley and Jade, seeing the situation, turned and ran, but were soon subdued by the police. They were forced to wear handcuffs because the police found drugs and 2 kitchen knives on them. They were soon charged with attempted murder and taken to the station for questioning. I was also taken to the station to make a statement to better understand the situation. On the way, I broke out in a cold sweat, unable to imagine what would have happened if I hadn't been cautious. Would they have killed me? The thought made me shiver. So, without any hesitation, I took out the videos and recordings I had prepared earlier, as well as the surveillance footage. The footage clearly recorded Jade harming Grace and their previous attempts to drug me, their smug faces, and their vicious plans. Even the police couldn't help but exclaim, "What a pair of natural-born villains, so cruel." With the evidence from the drugs and knives found on them, I formally sued both of them in court. The police and the court were sympathetic to my situation. According to the divorce agreement, Wesley left with nothing, and he and Jade had to compensate me $500,000. Jade was sentenced to 3 years in prison for intentional harm, and Wesley received the same sentence. Leaving the court, I felt an immense sense of relief, almost wanting to laugh out loud to express my joy. After this matter was temporarily settled, I hurried home, packed up all their belongings, and calmly took out my phone. "Hello, is this the junk collector? I have a pile of useless junk here. Come quickly, I'll sell it to you at a low price." The junk collector arrived quickly and was almost shocked by the items I was selling. Many new things were being sold at junk prices. He felt he had struck gold and immediately started loading everything with a big smile. Halfway through, Florence, who had gone somewhere, returned. Seeing her clothes and mahjong set thrown outside, she was furious, breathing heavily like an angry bull, her eyes red with rage. "You not only made Gigi owe a high-interest loan, but also got your husband sent to prison. Our family is really unlucky to have married you." With her son in prison and her daughter owing a high-interest loan, Florence was furious, spewing venomous curses. But her harsh words didn't affect me at all because I knew right from wrong. I knew that justice, though delayed, would eventually come, and I knew I was doing the right thing. I glanced at her casually and immediately noticed the gold bracelet and necklace she was wearing. I chuckled. "Before you curse me, shouldn't you return the things that belong to me? Taking someone else's things without permission is not right. It can be considered theft." Florence was startled, instinctively covering the gold bracelet, a guilty look flashing in her eyes, quickly replaced by greed and anger. "What do you mean your things? Is your name written on them? Why do you say they're yours? You're just making things up." Seeing her like this, I wasn't surprised at all. I coldly snapped, not wanting to argue with her anymore. I took out my phone. "Hello, police. There's a theft here. Can you come over?" I looked up and saw Florence's shocked and fearful expression. I gave her a triumphant smile, ignoring her screams, and called over the junk collector to help me grab her arms, reducing the workload for the police officers. While waiting for the police to arrive, my mind wandered. Florence had taken a significant amount of valuable gold, enough to file a case. She still thought she could twist the truth in front of the police. I closed my eyes, then opened them again to face the setting sun. In the blur, It seemed like I saw the child I almost brought into this world,